Welcome to the official podcast of DogsDaily.com, a Sports Illustrated channel.
Gets to the edge. Sonny Michel will send the Dogs home to the championship game.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you're in the right place.
Anthony Edwards with the jam. Are you kidding me?
Hosted by Dogs Daily writers Jeremiah Stoddard, Kyle Funderburk, and Jonathan Williams.
Here's a pitch. Hit high out into right center with some carry. It's got a chance. This ball is out of here. Tucker Bradley has won it.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Classic City Sports Podcast. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard along with Jonathan Williams, doing it remote again. Our boy Jonathan is not back at school yet, so he's not in town. So gonna do another virtual session for you guys this week, but still glad to have you on the show this week, Jonathan.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be back. And then I'm also thankful that I'll be back at school next week. I know vacation is nice, but I'm ready to be in Athens. First semester at UGA for myself this upcoming semester. So super pumped about that.
Shout out to our boy Jonathan there, making it to UGA.
Absolutely. And maybe I get my first semester started off at UGA with a national championship. You know, first days of class start on Monday. So maybe it gets started off with a national championship for Georgia. So maybe I was the missing piece all along for UGA. Maybe. Yeah. We'll find out on Monday, though.
What a way that would be. Your first day of classes start and Georgia wins a national championship, right? That's what we're obviously here to talk about. Exactly. Yep. That's obviously what we're here to talk about, right? We want to talk about the national championship review. We know everybody saw how down a few weeks ago in Atlanta, but another game, another day, have had time to prepare for it. We'll see how it goes this time. We'll break down what we think is going to happen, all that good stuff there as well. We do want to key in on something specific as well before we really dive into all of that. There was a lot of stuff that came out of ES Bowl season this year that really struck me like I was surprised. It caught me off guard to see Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond Howard sit there and talk about the opt-outs the way that they did. If you missed it, go look up the clip of Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond talking. Basically, they said that, college athletes that are opting out of these bowl games don't love the game anymore. This generation just doesn't love the game anymore. And they even said, Kirk Herbstreit went on to say, he goes, nowadays they just have all these distractions with, video games and cell phones and stuff like that. And he really went on to, and Jonathan and I talked about this the other day, he really went on to that old man, like get off my lawn type conversation when he started talking about distractions of cell phones and video games, as far as like keying in on why these guys are opting out of bowl games because they just don't love the game anymore like they did back when Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond Howard played. And, I'll get into my opinions on it in just a second as well, but I'll go ahead and kick it over to you, Jonathan. What was your initial reaction? Like when you were watching College Game Day and you heard Kirk Herbstreit say that, what was your initial response? Like in your mind, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
I was honestly kind of baffled just because Kirk Herbstreit so many times, 99.9% of the time, he is always talking for the players. He is always speaking on their better behalf, and he's always defending them. 99.9% of the time, Kirk Herbstreit is defending the players. But this time you saw him take the other position and say that these guys don't love the game anymore, basically ridiculing all of these players for opting out of their bowl games, feeling it is in their best interest to not play the bowl game and prepare themselves for the NFL or wherever else they may be going to. Doesn't matter. So I was just kind of caught off guard just because that's not very typical of Kirk Herbstreit. That's not usually how he speaks about the players. And it really just didn't make any sense to me just because I don't think that that the love for the game is at question at all with these kids. Because the other 12 games of the season, or 13 in some cases for teams that play in a conference championship, you see them out on the field. They are putting their lives on the line for that team. Obviously, they still love the game of football. They've stuck with their team for at least 3 or 4 years if you're opting out because you're going to the NFL, or at least that's your hopes of what your next chapter in life will be. So obviously these guys love the game because they're trying to make a career out of it. I mean, heck, me and you both know this, they put 12 months out of the year dedicated to the sport. They get some weeks off and now and then July they kind of get maybe roughly a month off or something like that. But I mean, they are always conditioning, they're lifting weights, or they're at practice, spring practice, fall practice, whatever else. I mean, 12 months out of the year, this is what they're dedicating their lives to, while also having to handle school. So the love of the game is not at question with these guys, obviously, or else they wouldn't even be here in the first place, or they wouldn't be in the position to go on and play in the NFL, hopefully at the next level. So I just thought that it was way out of left field for him to say that it was all because these guys just don't love the game the way that they used to back in his days or whatever.
Yeah, and once again, it's one of those things that, like, when you step back and think about it, right? Like, who makes all the money based on these bowl games, right? ESPN. ESPN is the channel for 95% of bowl games. Like, it's on ESPN or some type of ESPN channel that they're played on. So like they're the ones that are losing money when players may opt out and they may not have the viewership that they want to have and stuff like that. But here's the thing, you and I talked about this the other day, right? People get so mad at these players for opting out, and fans will call them quitters and other words that we won't say on a live stream. And I just look at those people and say, well, there's a few things that I look at it with it, right? So like the first thing is, Georgia had a couple players, opt out in past years when we weren't playing for a national championship. Like this year, Georgia's obviously got a lot more on the lines. You've got players playing that even George Pickens came back, which shocked a lot of people. But you and I sat here on this show and said the SEC championship game was a target return date for him. We said that back in spring when he got hurt because of the timeline that, based on the timeline, he could potentially be back. Guess what?
Sure
Georgia's
did.
in meaningful games and he's coming back to play. But that's because they are meaningful games. And there's still more to play for. There's more on the line. And these players signed up for the regular season. And yes, the bowl games are fun. They go to these games, they get swag bags, they get gift cards, they get all kinds of shopping sprees and stuff like that. They get a lot of stuff to go to these games like that. It's fun for a lot of them. But you got to think about these players that are like first round potential draft picks that are worried about potentially going out there and tearing an ACL and missing, and being hurt, missing the NFL combine or their pro day, or come draft day, they're still walking around on crutches because of it. And all of a sudden these NFL teams are looking at them like unsure about their health and long-term ability to play. And maybe they go from a first round pick down to a second round pick, even a third round pick. It depends on what the injury and what the situation is. And that's millions of dollars. They lose millions of dollars from going even first to second round, millions of dollars. That to me, like if they have to make that decision on their own. And getting back to the point that I was going to make there was, when you look at these guys opting out and it's your team that they're opting out from, don't look at it as like a negative where you're like, oh, hey, we wanted to see this guy play one more time. We wanted to be able to, win this game and have it matter more for us and everything like that. Well, guess what? Now you get to see these young guys get up and step up in their position, whoever takes their position. Now you get to see them play in a meaningful game. Now you get to have game tape on these guys that you haven't seen play a meaningful snap yet. Like that's the kind of stuff that you got to look at it as a fan's perspective and like, all right, cool. It gives us a chance. Game really doesn't matter. If you're not in the playoffs, what does it matter if you win the Tax Slayer Bowl? Like, who cares?
Yeah. Well,
like, I think it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think a great way to look at bowl games now is that, come spring practice when, Georgia has their whole G-Day thing and everybody gets to have their red versus black scrimmage, some variant of that, like whatever. They get to have their team versus their team. They get to have starters versus the starting group of the defense, whatnot. People get really pumped up about that. One, because college football has been 2 or 3 months without being played, so people are already missing it. But at the same time, everybody gets excited. Why? Because they get to see Gunnar Stockton come in and play. They get to see the Brock Vandagriff of last year come in. They get to see how JT Daniels looks with the offense now, what Todd Monken is doing differently, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great way to look at bowl games, is you're almost getting a pre-look of what spring practice will kind of look like. Now, you're not getting your early enrollees, of course. They're not going to be playing in these bowl games. But at the same time, you're getting to see guys that kind of rode the bench this year, maybe didn't get a lot of playing time this past year, and you're getting to see them play against a different college, like a different opponent, not even your own team, someone they play against in practice practice all the time, a totally different team. And it really kind of gives a good look of maybe what's in store for them. I mean, just think back last year when Georgia played against Cincinnati, we got a really good look at Latavius Burnett. And now he looked at in action at the star position. And this year for Georgia, he was great at the star position. Now he hasn't been getting as much playing time in recent games, but at the same time,
remind me to comment on that.
Yeah,
later.
Okay, I will. But at the same time, like what we saw in the bowl game is exactly what you got to have Latavius Burnett this regular season. So I think that's a great way to look at it. Is you're just getting a glimpse of what spring practice is going to look like and a glimpse into what next season is in store for you. And so then I'll also add on to this. I think a perspective that everybody needs to take when thinking about these bowl opt-outs and these players not playing and these quote-unquote players quitting on their team, I think you just have to see it as this. You have to be okay if they opt out. You just have to, okay, great. You're opting out. That's okay. It's in your best interest. That's your decision. And it's their personal decision to make, not anybody else's. They get to make that decision for themselves. And you just have to say, okay, that's great. Go on to the NFL, get your $1 million check, and represent our university in the NFL as best as you can. That's great. And if they play, same thing. Oh, that's great. We get to have one more game of you playing for our team. We get to watch you one more time. We get to watch you ball out on the field one more time. And in that way, no matter what happens, everything's okay. You're not hurt if they opt out, and you're not hurt if they played, because at the same time, it's both are good things. Both are good things if a player is opting out, because like I said, one, if they're opting out, that means that they probably have really good potential in NFL. That probably means that they have some serious talent that is going to be valuable to an NFL team at the next level. And it's great for your team to be represented in the NFL, because that's what recruits are going to look at. Like, what can you do for me to get me to the next level? That's what a lot of recruits are going to be looking at, is what can you do to develop me into an NFL caliber player? Well, if you have a lot of players opting out, that's a great sign for your program, because that means you have a lot of people that are going to the NFL. But then at the same time, if they play, then that's also great. I mean, you get to watch them, like I said, one more time, and you get to enjoy it and probably give yourself a better chance at a bowl game. But you can't sit here and say bowl games don't matter, and then when you lose and say because it's because of opt-outs, and then at the other hand, when someone does opt out, you get mad at them because they're hurting your team's chances at winning. If they don't matter, then it shouldn't matter if they opt out anyways to begin with.
Exactly. And you made a great point with Latavius Burnett, because we sat here and that was like one of those situations that all of a sudden the defensive back room just got completely depleted at Georgia, like within like the matter of a couple of weeks. And all of a sudden, because at that point, Tyreek Stevenson was gone. And so that's when you saw Latavius Burnett step in, and he played star extremely well this season so far. And that's something that we got a good glimpse of. And we talked about him for a long time in the offseason because we got to see that. And yeah, you have players like, think about like Aziz, who came back and played in that Cincinnati game. That was a big deal, right?
MVP.
Like, he made a big step. MVP. He came back and played in that game and risked his career, honestly, risked his career by coming back and playing it, because they already had medical concerns about him. And so then he came back, and if he had gotten hurt in that game, that's where I want to take this conversation real quick before we end it and move on to the rest of it. Is think about if he had gotten hurt in that game. They already had medical concerns about him. That's why he slipped where he did and didn't go in the first round. If he had gotten hurt, he would have dropped a lot further in that draft because of the concerns they already had. The fact that he played, it shows that he did really want to be there with his brothers and stuff. So you still have plenty of players out there like that really, really love the game, really love their university and their teammates, that they want to get out there and play. But just because somebody doesn't decide to play in that game does not mean that they don't love it just as much as the other person. They feel like they have to make a better decision for their self. Each individual person has to look at it from their perspective and see the pros and cons of playing in that game. And so like, that's how you got to look at it, is like, just because somebody makes that decision one way or the other, right? Like, you got to support it. So you had Matt Corral, who played in his bowl game, and he got hurt. Luckily, from what I've been reading and stuff, it was like a high ankle sprain, so like he should be fine. But he came back. He's a projected first round draft pick, I believe. And all of a sudden, now you're looking at, he got hurt in the bowl game that didn't matter for Ole Miss, and which, once again, he made the decision. So we are okay with the fact that he played in that game because he made the decision to play. That's his choice. Had he opted out, that's what he was afraid of playing for. Like, that he doesn't want to get hurt. Like, if he had opted out, doesn't want to get hurt and doesn't want to potentially mess up his draft stock. What if it was a serious injury? And then now he's screwed. Now he doesn't get to go to the combine and the pro days and all that kind of stuff and be able to show the NFL what he can do in that spot. So it really kind of caught me off guard to sit there and watch Kirk Herbstreit say what he did, and just like we said earlier, be like, get off my lawn type conversation. This phones are distracting them, so they're not as engaged in the game anymore. Video games are distracting them, so they don't love the game as much anymore. That's bullcrap. I had phone, video game, all that kind of stuff, and I played baseball in high school, and I absolutely loved the game. I would have played every bit I could, but I also didn't have much of a career afterwards, and I knew that. So, like, yeah, I would have played in a meaningless game because I wanted to play. But you can't sit here and say these love the game because they don't want to play in these games that are meaningless, that everybody calls meaningless. So, like, if everybody else calls them meaningless, how can you get mad at the kids for the same kind of thing? That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, and I think Justin, our boy Justin at that, just put out a great point. Is that one thing that has changed from when Herb Street played to when to now is that is the amount of money that is at stake. I mean, you have to think it is, like we said, it is millions of dollars, life-changing money for these guys, and it's a big difference between. Yeah. I mean, it even drops off just one pick. Like if you're the 15th pick, you get more money than the 16th pick in the first round does. Like it's a big deal between signing
first round to second round is massive.
Yeah, it's huge. So like protecting your career at all costs is huge for these players, and you have to make business decisions just like we do in the everyday life. Like we are constantly thinking for ourselves, like, is this a good move for me to make in the business world? Does this benefit me? So that's how these players are doing. They're taking the same perspective that we take in our everyday lives of, does this benefit me? Does this business move help me? Does me playing in this bowl game help me or hurt me more than for me to get to the next level? Or does this me taking this position at this job help me try and move up in my job or hurt me more? So at the end of the day, it just depends on if they feel like playing in that bowl game is worth it or not. And so some players don't feel like it is, some do. So that's it. That's all you can look at it as.
Absolutely. And so that's what we'll wrap it up as. Like that was a great comment by Justin there. Shout out to Justin. Yep. We love you, dude. You always help us out with everything else. You're part of the Discord family over there with Brooks. So we appreciate your support watching the show tonight. Thank you. But we'll kick it over, to the next part of the conversation, what we're really here to talk about, right? National championship preview, Georgia versus Alabama. We saw this go down a couple of weeks ago on December 4th. Between now and December 4th, Jonathan. So we're a month out actually, because today is the 5th. So we're just at a month mark of the last time Georgia played Alabama. We have 6 days, something like that, until they play again. 5 days, I don't know. And here, what's changed? What has changed in your perspective, Georgia versus Alabama going in this game after we got to watch the Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, and see how stuff played out? What do you look at this game? What's your initial response to the changes that you see have been made so far?
Well, I think honestly, one thing that has changed is kind of the attitude of this team. I don't think the team's attitude was in a bad spot going into the SEC championship game. Like, I don't think we had guys with bad attitudes or anything like that. But after playing 12 regular season games and dominating in all 12 of those, you kind of start to take on the attitude of like, well, we just have to maintain this. Like, we just have to maintain what we've been doing. We just have to continue to be playing like the number one team in the nation because that's what we're ranked as. And that's what everybody's telling us. And just keep at that because everybody's saying it's us and everybody else like 4 steps below us. So we just kind of have to keep on doing what we've been doing. We don't really have anything else to prove. Just got to keep doing our thing. Whereas now you get punched in the mouth on December 4th against Alabama and you get absolutely knocked out, like gasping for air, knocked out. And you have to go play Michigan. And you saw in the Michigan game, it looked like a team that was trying to reassert themselves in the national rankings, trying to prove everybody like, hey, that was just a fluke against Alabama. That is not this Georgia team. We're here to, and you've heard even players say it in their interviews, is they're saying like, we are here to prove people who we are, what kind of brand of football we want to play, and that we are capable of bringing home a national championship. So I think the attitude has really shifted a lot, and it's kind of went from, okay, we just got to keep doing our thing, like keep a level head. Whereas now, no, we're going to go and take what's ours. And we have to prove to everybody that we belong in this position. And we have to prove to Alabama that we belong in this game with them. And we have to prove to them that we are capable of beating them and ending our national title drought.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, it's put up or shut up, right? Like at this point, there is nothing more to do but do it. And so I've seen other people say the same kind of thing where they're like, but what's there to be said? At this point, you just got to go play the game. This is what we've all waited for. This is what Georgia's prepared for all season. This is what Alabama's prepared for all season. They've gotten to where they wanted to be. Now you have to go out and do it. Can you get out there and actually execute for the next 60 minutes of game time there to make sure that your team is the one that walks away with that trophy at the end of it and that you get all the bragging rights, all that good stuff? You've been preparing for it this whole time. One thing that I like to point out to Georgia fans right now, last time Georgia went on a national championship run, there was a very similar outcome, or a similar situation, right? So in the regular season, they lost to Auburn by 23 points, I believe,
It
on
was a lot.
November 11th, right? 3 weeks later, in the December 2nd, in the SEC championship game, they played again. Guess what? Georgia beat them by 21. They went from losing by 23 points 3 weeks before to winning by 21 points in the SEC championship game at that point. There's a lot of different variables that went in. They played on the road against them in the first game in Jordan-Hare Stadium. So, that plays a factor. All that, it started to unravel for Georgia in that game. Then the next one was a neutral site in the state of Georgia. So, yeah, all that kind of stuff plays in. But the reason I bring that up is Georgia lost by 17 points to Alabama a couple weeks ago, right? A month ago. 17 points, not even quite as much as they did against Auburn back in 2017. They turned around. Kirby Smart made the necessary adjustments, and he went out there and he actually beat Auburn dominantly, not even just by a little bit. He dominated Auburn in that game. And I remember, I'm sure you do too, all Georgia fans that I talked to would tell me, oh no, Georgia doesn't want anything to do with Auburn again, because the Iron Bowl was coming up and it came down to Georgia, or it came down to Alabama and Auburn playing each other of who was going to go to represent the SEC West. And everybody said, no, they want Bama. They want, as funny as that is, right? Everybody said they want Bama. They don't want anything to do with Auburn again. Well, first of all, you never want Bama. The Bama is Bama for a reason. That's not who you should be choosing.
We've learned that through all we want Bama signs. Nobody actually wants Alabama.
You don't actually want Alabama. You play Alabama.
Yeah.
You don't
Are you
want
sure
Alabama.
You do? Are you really sure?
Yeah. But you wanted Auburn. But Georgia got Auburn. Kirby Smart went out there and showed in that 3-week time period that he could make the necessary adjustments to win that game handedly. It wasn't even close. The game was never in a close game kind of setting. Now, no, I'm not saying that Georgia's going to come back from a 17-point loss against Alabama and come out and blow them out by 21 points or something here in the national championship game. It's not going to happen. That's not what I'm going to say. My point is, you got to have faith in Kirby Smart to make the adjustments, and it is extremely difficult to beat a team of this caliber versus Bama or Georgia or anybody in that top area, right? It's extremely difficult to beat the same team twice in about a month's time period. That's a very small turnaround time, and they learn a lot from that first matchup. Even Nick Saban came out and talked about this because, big matchup coming up and doing it over again. He came out and he said, from his days in the NFL, you would have division opponents that you would play twice a season. And so you would have to come back out and you played them twice, maybe 3 times if you played them in the playoffs again. And so you had to come out and change your strategy, your offensive strategy, defensive strategy to accommodate for what they have already seen, catch them off guard in different ways. You have to make those adjustments. That's what good coaches do. NFL coaches have to do it all the time. They play the division opponents twice a year at least. And, same kind of thing in settings like this where Georgia has to play Alabama for a second time. You got to see them go out there and make those necessary adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, because you got punched in the mouth, you get to see every possible thing that could go wrong in this next game. You saw it in the SEC championship game. Anything that could have gone wrong for Georgia, it happened. So you get to analyze that and say, how do we prevent exactly this from happening in the rematch in the national championship? So you have that advantage. Whereas Alabama, they're probably going well, we don't really have exactly a lot to fix against Georgia. We didn't do a whole lot wrong. We pretty much played a perfect game against them. So what do we fix? Well, I guess we just have to replicate what we did in the SEC championship game and put it on the field in the national championship, which is going to be really hard to do. Like I said, Alabama played flawlessly against Georgia, something that they had not done in the previous 12 games. And they didn't even do it against Cincinnati either. What they did against Georgia, they did not do against Cincinnati. So will they be able to replicate it again in the national championship? It's probably not likely. Then again, it is Nick Saban. He does miraculous things that nobody would ever expect him to all the time. So it is very possible as well. But for them to play a dang near perfect game again in the national championship is not likely. And Georgia, on the other hand, is going to be able to, has had the whole last month to fix those issues that they had in the SEC championship game, which when they played Michigan, it sure looked like they fixed a lot of those issues that they had. So.
Right. And I will say this, the disclaimer is no, Michigan's not Bama. So you play differently on that. One thing that I really wanted to ask Brooks, I haven't reached out to him yet on this, but I'm going to ask him this question as well. And, because he came out and said after that game, he was like, if you're going to beat Bama, you got to beat Kentucky the same way you're going to beat Bama. Right. And what he meant by that was you got to get out there, and if you're going to have to throw the ball 30 plus times against Alabama, you need to be throwing the ball 30 plus times against other opponents. So your offense is able to do that. You can't just turn on that switch, off and on when you want to or when you need to and expect there not to be any issues. I'm sorry to tell you this, but if you go into a game and expect your quarterback to throw the ball 48 times, which is what Stetson Bennett did against Alabama, guess what? He completed 30 of those. So he had a 60% completion percentage throwing 48 times against Alabama. But the biggest thing is he threw 2 interceptions, and they were costly interceptions, yes. One was in the red zone about to score. The other one was also, I believe, in the red zone area and then ended up being a pick six. So, they were very costly interceptions. But when you go out there and you ask your quarterback to throw the ball 48 times, you got to expect there to be a bad throw in there once or twice. You have to. And unless your quarterback is Aaron Rodgers, but even Aaron Rodgers throws interceptions. It happens. If you're going to go out there and ask your quarterback to do that much, you got to be prepared to deal with the consequences of throwing so many times. But the point of it is, if you're going to try to throw a lot 30 plus times against Alabama, you got to do the same thing against other opponents. So your offense is prepared to do that. The reason I say that is Georgia threw the ball. Surprisingly, I didn't expect this to be the case. And you and I talked about this prior. I even said that if the team had to throw the ball 30 times, that I expected that team to probably lose, whichever team it was. But guess what? Georgia blew out Michigan, and Georgia threw the ball 30 times. Stetson Bennett lined up and threw it, I think, 31 times. And I think he was 21 for 31, something in that range.
I think it was 20 for 31, something like that. Yeah,
20 for 31 with 313 yards and 4 touchdowns, I believe.
Absolutely balled out. Yeah,
absolutely. But the reason I bring that up like that is they beat Michigan in a way that they're going to have to beat Alabama. You're going to have to be able to have your quarterback go out there and throw 30 passes without turning the ball over. I will say this, though. If they go out and throw 30 passes against Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised to see Stetson throw 1 pick. I'm not saying I'm going to see him throw 2 interceptions and a pick 6 like that. But I do think you probably see, if he throws 30 times against Alabama, you might see an interception in there. The reason I say that is because every single game that he does throw the ball a decent amount, there's always at least one pass play that you're looking at him like, man, what were you doing? I love Stetson Bennett. I'm a big supporter of Stetson Bennett. We've talked about this so many different times on this show, and I do support him. And there's clearly a lot of support in the team and staff for him. They came out, there was all that before the game where you saw Todd Monken and even Stetson Bennett come out and talk and stuff like that, which was a really cool thing to see. But then after the game, you saw all of Georgia's team, especially the defense, was there cheering his name and saying, "We love you, mailman," all that kind of stuff, while he was getting interviewed by Marty at the end of that game. And so the support's all there for him. So it's been fun to see all of that for him. But even with all that support and being a big supporter myself of him, he always has that at least one play a game that you're just going, man, what are you doing? And that play happened against Michigan, and it didn't have a bad outcome, but it did happen again against Michigan. I believe it was the first drive of the third quarter, and it was Georgia's first 3 and out of the game. And he rolled out to the right side and then tried to throw it across his body back to the middle of the field while he was getting hit, and just basically threw the ball up in the air. It hung up in the air so much. There were 3 Michigan defenders that ended up getting closer to it, and luckily it went down as an incomplete pass. Nobody caught it, no interception, anything like that. But he just threw the ball up. That's what he does when he throws the ball a lot of times, and you get at least one of those. So I expect something like that. If he has to throw the ball 30 times against Alabama, I expect something like that. The reason I say I expect a pick in that situation is because it's Alabama. It's not Michigan. Alabama's defense is going to be a lot faster and a lot cleaner and potentially picking that off if he throws one like that. That was the only issue I had with him in the entire game against Michigan, is he just threw the ball up one time.
And this is what Georgia has to not do when they play Alabama. And I put an article out about it, so if you want to go check that out after the show, be my guest. But I think I'll be able to kind of voice what I was trying to say in the article better here. But Georgia has to stay away from having the segment in the game where all the crap hits the fan. They have to avoid that. You saw it in 2020, and you saw it in the 2021 SEC championship game. You have to avoid this stretch in the game where you're punting the ball repeatedly, or even worse, turning it over while Alabama is putting up points on the board. Georgia did not score a single point in the second half last year against Alabama, while Alabama opened up the half just absolutely explosive as all get out, hitting their deep shots, burning people deep, putting points on the board, where Georgia wasn't doing anything on offense. And then this year in the SEC championship game, things were great again going into halftime. I mean, last year you had a lead going into halftime. This time you were still in a good position to win the game going into halftime. But you open up the half with 2 punts and 2 interceptions. Alabama opens up with 2 touchdowns and a field goal, I believe. So you can't have that against Alabama. You cannot have this point in the game where you're punting multiple times in a row while Alabama is putting up points on the board. You absolutely cannot do that. It's fine if you have to punt the ball, but it can also mix in with your defense allowing points on the board as well. So if Georgia can avoid that, I really like their chances against Alabama. But then again, like the last 2 times, they have yet to avoid that situation in these games. So you have to wonder, is it going to happen again in the national championship? Now, and I think they have to replicate what they did against Michigan. I think you brought up a great point of you have to beat Michigan the way you want to beat Alabama. And I think they absolutely did that. And kind of similarly, the offense kind of had to withstand the similar things that Alabama's going to do to them. They had Aiden Hutchinson and Ojabo, while Alabama has Will Anderson. So, I mean, Aiden Hutchinson finished second in the Heisman race, while Will Anderson probably should have been in the Heisman race with the Final Four, in my opinion. Probably should have been there. But nonetheless, it's still a tremendous athlete. And they did a great job with Aiden Hutchinson and Ojabo. Ojabo did not even record a single defensive stat the whole game, not even one singular tackle.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, did not have a single tackle in the game. Didn't record a single stat. I was writing an article about it, and I was trying to find his stats. I was like, where the heck are his stats? Like, what the heck? Did they not upload or anything? No, he did not record a single tackle that entire game. While Aiden Hutchinson, I think, had maybe 4 tackles and maybe 1 tackle for loss or something like that. So you did a good job managing those guys. Now you have to do it with Will Anderson and at the same time be explosive like you were against Michigan. Hit your deep shot to James Cook. I think James Cook is going to play a pivotal role for Georgia. I think he really needs to be involved in this game. I said he was going to be the difference maker against Michigan. 144 total yards later and a touchdown. I think you have to get James Cook involved again and put him on the outside. He did it in 2020 against Alabama. He burned them down the field for like an 86-yard touchdown reception. So he's someone that really needs to be involved. So you got to hit your shots. You got to stay consistent, and you can't just have these 3 and outs while Alabama is just absolutely lighting up the scoreboard, leaving you in the dust for you to never be able to even get back in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to stick to your brand of football and play like you have been playing throughout the entire season. That one game, and I know Brooks did a really good job breaking down the defense for Georgia against Alabama on there. And he said they tried a lot of different things and they were doing stuff we had done throughout the year and it just wasn't working. And Bryce Young just picked that defense apart. And he was pre-snap, figured out what we were doing, and he would come out there and just light Georgia up. And so like stuff like that's really hard to combat, right? Like you just have to have your dudes out there making plays, but you can't have a bunch of busted coverages on defense and give them those big wide open touchdowns like you saw, Williams have in that game, that huge touchdown over the middle of the field. Like you can't have plays like that. You got to make them go make big plays, make them make a good play. Don't give them those free layups that turn into massive plays on there as well. And to kind of give myself a little shout out, you talk about James Cook, but if you remember correctly, who was it that I pointed out on the defensive side that I said they had to have a good game against Michigan to help the rest of the team play well, and that was Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith had a good game himself as well. He didn't get defensive player of the game, obviously, because Kendrick had 2 interceptions. Can't really beat that. That's pretty crazy, right? But Nolan Smith led the team in tackles with 8. He had a sack. He had a tackle for a loss and a pass deflection, along with an extra quarterback hurry. Georgia only had 2 quarterback hurries outside of their sacks that they had as well. So he had one of those 2 and one of the 4 sacks that Georgia, I think it was 4. Yeah, 4 sacks that Georgia had and that 8 tackles that he had as well. So he had a really good game. That's something you're going to have to see as well against Alabama, where same concept, exact same concept. The reason, a little bit different of the reason for it, but the same kind of thing that you have to have. He's got to seal that edge. And that way you don't see, Bryce Young out here getting outside the pocket and just scrambling and creating extra plays with his legs and get throw and that kind of thing. He's got to be able to seal the edge. Same thing with Trayvon Walker, on the other side, or whoever else might be playing the end on the other side. They've got to be able to keep him contained in the pocket to where he can't extend plays, because he killed Georgia. He scrambled a few times. That weird pitch play that he had that turned into a huge play was after he scrambled out. He would find wide receivers downfield as well, scrambling out. And if you keep him contained a little bit more, you'll have a better game. And if you can keep him contained, you're going to have guys like Jalen Carter and Nakobe Dean be able to blitz down the middle and actually get home on those, because that is my key to this game. If if you can't get at least a couple of sacks against Bryce Young, kiss it goodbye. Bryce Young is going to eat you alive. If you cannot make him uncomfortable in that game, you got to do it. We go back to the same thing. You got to do what Auburn did against him and you don't need 7 sacks, but you need to make him uncomfortable and get those sacks and get home with those. And that starts on the edge to making him stay in that pocket and make him get uncomfortable with that pass rush. So that's my key to this game right there is can the defense, led by players on the Nolan Smith, get out there and do the same thing again that they did against Michigan and let them eat. If they get 4 sacks against Alabama, that's a great place to be.
Well, I think also, after the SEC championship game, everybody was like, man, our corners are getting burned. Our corners can't cover anybody. Well, your pass rush wasn't getting home, and that's been their best friend the entire regular season. We talked about that before the season even started. I said, yeah, the defensive backs are something to worry about for Georgia's defense, but at the same time, you have a really good front seven, and that's the best friend to a best friend to pass coverage is a pass rush. Because if your pass rushers are making the quarterback rush or throws, that's going to help them out a lot. You did not do that to Bryce Young in the SEC championship game. You did not. He was able to sit back in the pocket, scramble out, go over wherever he wanted to go and make the throws that he wanted to, and just picked you apart. So I think Georgia's obviously has really good cornerbacks. Darian Kendrick had a great game against Michigan, and then you really didn't hear Keely Ringo's name against Michigan, which is always a good sign for cornerback. If you're not ever hearing their name, that's usually a good sign and that they're doing a good job in covering their man. So Georgia is solid at the defensive back position. It's not their strongest part of the defense by any means, but they were still solid there in my opinion. But you have to have your defensive line get some pressure on Bryce Young. I don't even think you necessarily have to get home on him a lot of the time. I don't think you have to get sacks. I think, like you said, though, I think 4 sacks should be a goal for Georgia, of course. I think that puts you in a great position to win that game. But if you can just disrupt him, make him feel rushed, make his throws a little more inaccurate because you're kind of putting some pressure on him, that's Georgia winning. If you can just hurry Bryce Young, yes, just hurry him. Don't necessarily have to bring him to the ground, but if you can just hurry his process and his thinking process, he's proven that he's not as good of a quarterback when that happens, and he's bound to make a mistake in that scenario as well. So I think a lot of it, I think this national championship game is really going to rely upon how well the defensive line is playing and those linebackers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be the key. I think the biggest difference in this game that Georgia had to fix is honestly, I understand that Stetson Bennett threw 2 interceptions that were very costly, right? But Georgia's defense gave up 34 points. Yeah, 34 points against Alabama. If Georgia's defense gives up 34 points again, it doesn't matter what the quarterback does. Unless he's going to throw 50 for 50 for 560 yards and 6 touchdowns or something like that, it's not going to matter what he does. If they give up 30 points on defense, Georgia lost. It's end of story. Georgia lost. Ideally, you're going to keep them under 20 points is what you really need to be able to do because Bama has a good defense as well. And so you're going to have to go up against that with this offense that Georgia has. And so if they creep up to 30 points, Georgia doesn't – I don't think Georgia has a chance to win if it gets to where it's a 35 to 31, 32 game, something like that. Like Georgia's in trouble in that. They can't beat Bama in that type of game, I don't think. I could be wrong. You never know. But I just don't think that's not the recipe for success. So when your defense gives up 31 points or 34 points like they did last time, you're not going to win.
Well, I think also something to point back to the Michigan game is something that's going to be similar in this matchup or this rematch with Alabama is that you went up against one of the best run defenses in the nation. I think, like we said, Michigan ranked 20th, I believe, in run defense in the nation. Alabama has a really good run defense as well. I think James Cook was, the leading rusher for Georgia. It may have been Zamir White, but we didn't have a single rusher crack 100 yards. I don't think anybody even got to 80 rushing yards. So you were forced.
Are you talking about Georgia?
Yeah.
Georgia, yeah, I think it was like around 50. I think the 54 was the leading rusher for Georgia.
Okay,
and that was Zamir White.
Zamir White was your leading rusher with 54 yards. So you were forced.
The team had like 150 or something like that.
Okay, yeah. So that's on the lower end for a team like Georgia. So you were forced to throw the ball. You forced Stetson, or really forced, but Stetson Bennett made the plays with his arm to put you in a position where you were able to blow out Michigan. You didn't have to rely on the run game because one, you probably didn't think you could against a defensive line like Michigan's, and you're going to have to do the same thing against Alabama. I'm not saying they need to abandon the run game. I think Georgia can have some success running the ball against Alabama, but you're going to have to rely on Stetson Bennett to make some plays, and you're also going to have to rely on your receivers to make plays. You can't have a mishap in an RPO at Adonai Mitchell. You can't have that happen, and you can't be running your routes shallow or overrunning the ball or anything like that. James Cook in the SEC championship game, like you can't have that happen. So you have to be hitting on all cylinders in your passing game. You have to avoid turning the ball over, and you just have to trust Stetson Bennett. Trust him like you have this entire season. He's proven in the big moments, just like in the College World Playoff semifinal game, he balls out when it matters most, more times than not. So you just have to trust him to make the right decisions. Trust him like you did against Michigan, and I think Georgia will be fine against Alabama, and I think they'll be in a really good position in this game to bring home a national championship for the first time in 40 plus years.
Absolutely. And to go along with what you're saying, right? So like the rushing stats were low for Georgia there. I think Georgia is close to 200 yards per game as far as rushing stats normally. So 150 is low for them, right? And a leading rusher only having 54. They spread it out between a few players there, obviously, as well, which is what Georgia always does. But what helped with that, right, was Georgia threw the ball 30 times. But I can't count. I'd have to go back and watch and count it. It's probably double digits of how many times they threw at the line of scrimmage or almost by like screen type plays. They stretched the zone. They made those defenders get out of the middle of the field and stretch them out by throwing in the flats and doing stuff like that to really be the extension of the run game, because the run may not have been there up the middle like normal. They stretched the defense out and made it work that way, where it was a pass play and it counts for stats for Stetson Bennett. But that's what works against teams like that. And it might work against Bama too, with like an Anderson on the corner. You can kind of take him out of the game a little bit if you get the ball out of his hand really fast. That's what I think happened against that. I think that was what the game plan was for Georgia going up against Michigan, right? It was get the ball out of Stetson Bennett's hand as fast as you can, because those edge rushers are terrifying, right? And it had several different impacts on the game. One, he got rid of the ball very fast, so he didn't take that many hits, although he threw one beautiful touchdown pass to James Cook down the left side late in the game when he took a shot in the back. It immediately took a shot in the back when he was throwing the ball. Beautiful pass, ended up being a huge touchdown. That was one of the longer times he held the ball. But by throwing the ball outside of the numbers and those screen plays and quick passes, what it did is you actually saw Hutchinson getting outside and trying to play coverage. Like you saw him abandon the rush, because he one time he did read, and I think he swatted one or something like that. He read the ball and he jumped out and he almost made a play on the ball like that. But what you did is now you don't have to worry about him rushing. He's watching. So every time you swing that running back out that side, or that receivers are stacked over on that side, he's slow on his rush. He's not doing that speed rush on you anymore. And so you don't have to worry about him getting home in 2 seconds. So you have a little bit more time to throw the ball. That's what they did. In my opinion, that was my observation of what their game plan was against Smith. Get the ball out of Stetson's hand as fast as you can. Be the extension of the run game, however you want to do it. And it worked beautifully. I mean, it was an absolutely phenomenal way to do it. And I think that's a similar way that they should probably go about doing it against Alabama again. And because that'll help Stetson Bennett have more time in the pocket, keep him clean, let him throw the ball, on different spots of the field like he usually does, get him out of the pocket when he wants to, like scheduled out of the pocket rather than having to scramble away and throw it on, an improvised play. But get it out of his hands to the playmakers like Brock Bowers, like Ladd McConkey, like even, you got other wide receivers. George Pickens is back now. You've got A.D. Mitchell out there. Get them into the playmakers' hands. Let them make plays against these defensive backs in one-on-one type situations. And when you have such a great, stacked area that you can do, like I saw a couple times that we ran 3 tight ends in a bunch set on the left side of the field. And so then we threw a screenplay, but then you have Fitzpatrick and Darnell Washington blocking for Brock Bowers, like against defensive backs. That's a great matchup. Like that kind of stuff is what made Georgia so successful against Michigan, that I think will work again against Alabama. They have to change it up. You don't just do the exact same thing because they watch game tape, but still, like that's what's going to help Stetson Bennett.
Well, I think that plays hand in hand with, you got to take what the defense gives you. Don't try and force your hand. Don't try and force things into making them work. Don't try and make your deep shot work against Alabama. If they're giving you the flat, shallow on the left side of the field, take your flat and get the yards that you can. If they want to give you the slant route over the middle instead of James Cook gets a defensive back on the right side going deep, then take your slant, take your 5 yards, take your 8 yards or whatever, and just take what the defense gives you. You can't try and force the ball against a team like Alabama. So you have to just take what the defense gives you. Just read what they're giving you and keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what Georgia's offense needs to do against Alabama. Just keep it simple, run the ball, keep your game honest, and then allow things to develop in the air. That's all Georgia has to do. Really just keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate them against Alabama, because then you're going to get put in a hole like you have the last 5 meetings you had with them. So I think if they sorry, I have a freaking ESPN ad playing in my ear right now. Gosh. So I think if they just keep it simple, take what the defense gives them, again, I think the offense will be much better off than they have in the last 2 meetings.
Absolutely. I would agree. And it's one of those things that you just got to have a consistent play throughout the game. I think most of the time what you see when Georgia plays against Alabama is that roller coaster type performance, right? Like, and before this last game, Georgia had been leading Alabama at halftime in the previous 2 or 3 meetings where they're actually winning at halftime. And then all of a sudden it unravels and they get inconsistent with it. Like, it just stay consistent, and you don't have to stay flawless, but you can't make crucial errors. Todd Monken, in one of the interviews this week when they were talking about Stetson Bennett, he said Stetson has everything that we need offensively to have a good game and to perform, appropriately and win a national championship. He's got everything that we need. He said turnovers will kill any team. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. If you're going to have turnovers, it's going to kill you. And so you got to limit those against Alabama, and you may need to cause a little bit of havoc on the other side of the ball where you actually get a turnover or so against Alabama, because we talked about this after that game as well. Don't forget that Bryce Young scrambled out to his left, and I think they got about to the 25-yard line of Georgia. Devontae Wyatt came out, punched the ball out of his hands, and then we didn't fall on it. We actually let him get the ball back. And we had Nolan Smith and somebody else I think was right there that should have been able to get that ball back, right? You've got to capitalize on those situations. You can't give Bama the ball back right there and let them go score a touchdown on you right before half. That was right before the end of the first half, I believe, and that's what gave Bama the lead. I think it was 17-17 at that point, if I remember correctly. We talked about this already. But if you go in, you get that turnover, you get time to go down the field and maybe put up points yourself, and it's a swing. You could be leading again at halftime or something like that, versus trailing and then immediately starting the third quarter with a huge touchdown for Alabama on a deep pass play. And all of a sudden you're trailing, and you completely change the way you have to play that game all of a sudden. It's no longer the game plan anymore. You now have to rely on Stetson Bennett throwing the ball 48 times because of that small change of time. Like, within 2 minutes of the end of the first half and the first 2 minutes of the second half, that's where Georgia was now in a place where they couldn't play the game that they wanted to play anymore. You have to eliminate that inconsistent play and capitalize on those opportunities that you get that Bama's going to give you occasionally. And so if you don't get it when they give you the chance, kiss it goodbye. You're not getting it again.
That's it right there. You have to take advantage of your opportunities that are given to you when playing Alabama on both sides of the ball. Like we said, if Alabama presents the opportunity to get a turnover and get an extra possession for your offense, you absolutely have to cash in on the opportunity, because they're not going to happen very often. And then on the offensive side, when you're in the red zone, you have to take advantage of that opportunity, and you have to put up a touchdown. You can't be settling for field goals every time you go down to the red zone. If Alabama is giving you the opportunity to take a deep shot, you have to take advantage of that opportunity. You have to hit James Cook. You have to hit Ladd McConkey. You have to hit Brock Bowers down the field. You have to take advantage of the opportunities that Alabama is presenting you with. But at the same time, you have to keep it simple still and take what they're giving you. But when they give you that opportunity to take advantage of it, then you absolutely have to cash in on it. You have to make sure that you hit that one. You have to hit that play. You have to make that play, because if they're not often, they don't come. They're not just like, it's not like the Dollar General store and you just can take whatever you want at a low price. Like, they are very rare, and they can oftentimes be expensive, but you have to take advantage of them and make sure you make the most of that opportunity.
Yeah, you got to look at your matchups and stuff like that. When you see a one-on-one situation for a Brock Bowers outside or a George Pickens or something like that, at that point you gotta trust Todd Monken and Kirby have to trust Stetson Bennett to take that shot when those are going to be there. When they see that opportunity, you got to take it. We saw that one huge play to Pickens down the left side of the field early in that game. It was his first catch of the game, I believe, and it was. We didn't see it again. Georgia didn't try to stretch the field the same way after that. And you got to find out those moments where you have the chance to do it and actually take advantage of those, because like you said, they're not going to keep coming up over and over again. They're limited opportunities, and if you miss it, they don't come back. So it's really just cashing in on the opportunities that you get and making sure you just play as clean as possible game. Like, you basically do have to play a perfect game against Bama. You do. Like, you shouldn't have to, because it's difficult to do that, but against Bama, and after what we saw losing by 17 points last time, you have to go in and plan to play a perfect game, and don't panic if something does go wrong, though. Like, you got to keep your composure. Don't your entire game plan out the window, play, and all of a sudden they score that huge touchdown, and you feel like you're trailing, so you change the way you want to play. Do something that's in a nice little a momentum type thing, of offense where he feels comfortable operating, and I think that's what you want to see, and that's going to be the key of it. I know we kind of went over like our keys already of the game. So is there anything else you want to add as far as like a key component that you're looking for as a game plan standpoint? Not the player. We'll get to the players in a second, but a key game plan component that you're looking for Georgia to have success against Alabama.
I think you just got to stay within yourselves. Don't try and do things that Georgia football normally wouldn't do. I think they kind of got into that in the SEC championship game, because when we were watching, a lot of us were saying like, this does not look like the Georgia team that has been playing all of these all 12 regular season games. This does not look like Georgia football right now. I think what you saw against Michigan was a perfect game from Georgia football. I think they stayed within themselves. They didn't do anything that they normally typically wouldn't do, other than the trick play that McIntosh throwing a touchdown pass. I think that was really the only time that they kind of got outside of their identity. But even then, like, it wasn't something that you were like, I don't remember Georgia ever really doing anything like that. So I think if they just stay within themselves, stick with your DNA, stick with who Georgia football is, play your brand of football, I think they'll be okay. Don't step outside of the boundaries and try and be something you aren't, or something that you haven't been for the last 14 games. Stay within yourself, stay on brand, keep the main thing, as Coach Kirby Smart would say, and just be you, man. Just be you. It's worked for 13 out of 14 games. Just be you.
Absolutely. That's it. Just play your brand of football. That's what I said earlier, and that's what I would completely reiterate with you there as well. Just play your brand of football, and let the best team win. Everybody's got dudes. Both teams have dudes on each side of the ball.
Yep.
At every position, they're all talented. Let them play it out. Don't try to overcomplicate things and try to like win this big chess match kind of thing where you're trying to make these huge, scheme type moves. Play your game. Let the players get out there and do their jobs, and Georgia has a good chance to be able to win this game. Once again, like I said at the beginning of the show, and then after this, we'll go into players to watch kind of thing like we did for the other games as well. And just remember that, I lost my train of thought by doing that. What was I saying? Crap. I don't know. Anyways,
you kind of made me start thinking about who I was going to say for players to watch. Honestly,
oh well, I'll skip it. We'll go straight to that then.
I'm sure it was valuable information though, so we
probably was.
Jeremiah.
Yeah. I just had a bird brain moment. But anyways, we'll just go ahead and skip straight. We'll skip straight to players to watch and stuff like that, right? So go ahead we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. Who are you looking to? Are you going to stay consistent with who you've had past couple times, or you've had a couple times, or are you going to go with somebody else on offense?
I'm sticking with my man James Cook. He's the best, in my opinion. He's the best dual threat athlete that Georgia has right now. You have so much success running the ball with him, and then in the passing game, he's such an asset to put up. I think it was 123 receiving yards in that last game against Michigan. It's ridiculous stuff. So I think I'm going to stick with him, just because also you have to look back at what he's done against Alabama in past games as well. I think he's just a legit threat. And what you have to do, you have to hit deep shots. And I think James Cook is going to play a pivotal role in you having to do so, because we've learned by now, and everybody has learned by now, if you get James Cook one-on-one on the outside, you might as well just go ahead and put 7 points on the board. Yeah, you just go ahead and put 7 points on the board, because he's scoring a touchdown. Stetson Bennett's going to hit it. So offensively, that's who I'm going with. And then for defense, I'm going to go with Nakobe Dean. And the reason why I'm going to go with Nakobe Dean is because it seems like when Georgia's defense is playing really well together, I think it all stems of how well Nakobe Dean is playing and what he's doing. I mean, go back to the play against Michigan where he literally read the play before it even happened. He looked to Quay Walker. I think it was Quay Walker that was beside him. Literally said, hey, they're doing this motion. This is what's going to happen. Goes across the entire field and makes a tackle for loss. So I think when Nakobe Dean is hitting on all cylinders, the defense is as well, because Nakobe Dean is your best leader. My basketball coach used to always say, you're only as good as your best leader is. So when Georgia's best leader and Nakobe Dean is playing really well, that entire defense is playing really well. So if Nakobe Dean is my player to watch is definitely Nakobe Dean, just because, one, he's going to play a role in the pass rush, and their whole success, I think, stems off of how well he's playing.
Yeah, I agree. And that play you're talking about, it was a beautiful play by Nakobe Dean there. I remember before the play, he kind of identified it, and I think it looked like he was in a man coverage type setting, and his guy went in motion across behind the field or behind the quarterback and stretched to the other side, and he just chased him the entire way, which is an extremely difficult thing to do in man coverage, especially for a linebacker, to chase all the way across the field and make that tackle for a loss. It was an incredible thing to watch. But on offense, for me, I'm going to go with our boy Brock Bowers. The reason I'm going to go with Brock Bowers is pretty simple. He is 154 yards away from a 1,000-yard receiving game for the second all-time to do that for Georgia. If he were to get 154 yards in this game, he is only the second player in Georgia history to go over 1,000 yards receiving, and he is a freshman tight end. He's already gone over any single season stat record for any tight end that Georgia's ever had, reception-wise, touchdown-wise, yardage-wise, all of it, right? So now I'm looking for him to go 154 more yards to get to a 1,000-yard game or a 1,000-yard season. And honestly, I think he needs 158 to tie Terrence Edwards as all-time leader for Georgia's. I think he had 1,004 yards in his 1,000-yard season that he had as well. So he's that close, 158 yards away from being the all-time
freshman.
A freshman. And he wasn't the Mackey, is it the Mackey Award, the tight end?
Yeah, the Mackey Award.
He wasn't a finalist for that. But he's potentially a 1,000-yard receiver this year as a tight end, a freshman, and he wasn't a finalist for the Mackey Award. But that's my guy. I think that he's the one to watch because they won't feed just for that, but I'm going to be watching that personally. I want to see him get that extra 154 yards. So I'm watching to see him break that record myself. That's going to be my offensive side. Defensively, I'm going to go in the secondary. I think that you got to look at Chris Smith in the secondary to have a big game. I feel like he was kind of out of position a couple of times against Alabama last time, and on that huge James
probably not
Williams.
100% healthy though. Kind of have to remember that as well.
Exactly, you do.
He was coming off injury.
Exactly, you do, and I'm taking that into account, and that's why I say I want to see him have a bounce back game in that spot because he's had more time to recover from it. I want to see him get out there and make a big play and help cover over top of those cornerbacks that might get picked on. You got to think about, Keely Ringo is probably going to be targeted a couple times in this game. Kendrick got beat one time. I think the only time I remember somebody getting beat against Michigan was Kendrick, but he made up for it with 2 interceptions later in the game himself. So you're going to have a cornerback get beat at some point. You got to have your safeties over top to help out. And that's where I'm going to look for Chris Smith because I think Seen's going to be used a little bit more down in the box to help with short passing situations or maybe even run game rather than be a deep safety all the time. That's where I think Chris Smith is going to come in. So I'm looking for Chris Smith to have a big game to really help Georgia get home on some of those pass rushes. Maybe they hold up a little bit more and they help. Maybe we switch roles. Last time the defensive backs were getting beaten, there was no pass rush. Maybe the defensive backs can sit back and give the pass rush a little bit more time to get home. Maybe that's the key to this game. But that's who I'm watching. I'm watching Chris Smith to see if he can perform and really help close out this national championship win for Georgia.
Yeah, I think Brock Bowers could very well get the 1,000 yards. I mean, it still would take a lot. Don't get me wrong, 158 yards or whatever against Alabama is by no means an easy thing to accomplish. But in the last game, I think he had 11 receptions for 134 or something along the lines of that against Alabama. Yeah. So it is very possible. He's proven that he can get his against the best team in the nation or the kings of college football. I say, don't know who the best in the nation is yet. We'll find that out on January 10th on Monday. So on Monday night. So
on Monday night.
I think it is possible, and I like the pick of Chris Smith as well. I think he's been such a valuable piece for Georgia all season long, and then when he's not in the game, you can obviously tell that something is missing from that defense. So I think Chris Smith is a great pick with the defense as well. So, yeah, I think if those 4 players do what they need to do, I think Georgia will be in good hands to come out with a victory.
Absolutely, and we're trying to close out this 41-year drought, 42-year drought at this point.
Yeah.
41 because it's the 2021 season going to win it in 22 kind of thing. So we'll say 21 or 41 years trying to close that drought out and never hear 1980 again. That's what we're hoping for. So that's what we're going for here. So, but I'll let you start. We talked about this a little bit before the show. This is the last thing I've got. And if you got something else, go ahead and throw it in. But we got to do it. We got to do score predictions, and I'm going to kick it to you first.
I really don't know, man. I've been thinking about who I think will win this game. I mean, I don't even know if I can center around a score right now. I mean, that's kind of where the position I am at right now. If I'm being 100% honest with everybody, for the time being, I am leaning towards Alabama. I don't know if I can give you a score right now. I think I am leaning towards Alabama right now. But to be fair, I have not, and Brooks hasn't been able to put it out yet, but I have not been able to watch Brooks's tape yet. I have not been able to see what his takes are on the game, what things went wrong for Georgia. So I haven't been able to grind the tape with Brooks yet. And that usually is my indicator of who I think is going to win this game. So to be fair, that has not occurred yet. But for right now, I am leaning towards Alabama and probably like a 28-24 game, something like that. I think either whoever wins, I think it's going to be a 28-24 type of game. But yeah, right now I am leaning towards the Crimson Tide to win 2 national titles in a row and for Georgia to lose their 5th game in a row to Alabama.
How dare you come on the show and pick
I'm
Alabama?
Sorry, I know. Throw your tomatoes on the stage and boo me all you want, but that's just me being a realist.
I will say that you and I are very, very similar. Once again, like we are a lot of times in our score predictions there, because I'm going with, I think it's about a 27-24 game. I think it's right at that 3-point mark, which is what the spread is right now. And that's right about where I think the over under is set at. I think it's set at right at 52 or something like that. So
yeah, something like that.
It's right about the same score of what they're predicting as far as that goes.
Which
so
Georgia is favored right now. I think that should be noted.
Georgia favored by 3.
Favored in this matchup right now.
They are. So I'm going to stick with Georgia because I'm not going to pick Alabama. I refuse. I will not pick Alabama.
Homer.
I can't. I can't pick them. There's a reason that Vegas still has them Georgia favored by 3 points. So I'm going to stick with them 2 by 3.
You're right.
And I'm going to say it's 27-24 Georgia in a very close game. It's going to be one that I'm going to be stressed out the entire time. And just we get to hopefully celebrate a national championship win. So that's all I got.
I think we just made history on this show because honestly, I mean, we started this back against Cincinnati. I think this is the first time in show history that we have ever disagreed on who is going to win a football game with Georgia. Every time we agree. So, I wanted to be different this time. I didn't want to just go with the crowd
picking
or anything.
Alabama.
So, look, like I said, it could change. Like when the article comes out on Dogs Daily this week of score predictions, you very well could see my name with Georgia winning this game and whatnot. So don't call me a hypocrite, but I'm just saying, like, Wednesday night, whatever the day is, like right now, I am feeling like Alabama has the edge in this game. Just because, again, like I told you before the show, it's one of those things almost now where I've got to see it to believe it, and I have not seen it since 2017. I have not seen it.
I agree. We talked about that. Is to give a little bit of perspective there. We talked about this before the show. We got our general idea of going in. That's when he gave me a hint that he was going to pick Alabama. But it's one of those things that you gotta see Georgia do it at this point, right? Like at this point, everything's done. There's no more talking. You got to see Georgia go out and actually just win this game. You got to see Kirby Smart get over the Alabama hump. Whether or not they want to talk about that or not, as a fan's perspective, we sit back and we watch it. There's definitely an Alabama hump. That's somebody you got to get past at some point in time.
Absolutely.
And at this point, Georgia's got the team to do it. They do. So now you got to sit back and just see them do it. And so it's hard to believe in something when you feel like it's just odds stacked against you, constantly see them lose this game. So I understand the fans that have that perspective, but I think Georgia can do it. I think it's extremely hard to beat a team of this caliber twice in a month time period. I think that's where Georgia has the advantage. Even at the beginning of the season, before the season even started, I think it was David Pollock and Lee Corso both picked Georgia to win the national championship game, and at least one of them, I think it was one of them, I think it was Lee Corso
or Corso
Pollock,
maybe.
One of them directly said that Georgia would lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game and turn around and beat them in the national championship game. I think it was David Pollock, actually. And so that would be exactly what they predicted to happen based on the way it's played out. And the reason for that is it's hard to beat the team twice. If they had to play twice in the same season, whoever plays or wins the first game, you got to think they're probably going to lose the second one. It's tough to do. And so that's what I'm going to leave you with. It's tough for Bama to beat Georgia twice in a row in the same season this close together. Kirby Smart's got to get out there and prove he can make those adjustments like he did against Auburn in 2017 after losing by 23 points, turning around and winning by 21 3 weeks later in the SEC championship game that year, which led to a national championship run for Georgia against Alabama, obviously. So that's what you got to see Kirby Smart do at this point. That's what you want to see. You want that type of response. You're not going to expect to beat Bama by 21 this time, but that's what you want to see at this point. So that's all I got. I'm ready to just sit back, grind a little bit of tape with Brooks in the next couple of days, and get ready for this national championship game. What about you, Jonathan?
Oh, 100%. And by the time our next episode is recorded next week on Wednesday, we will know who is the national champions of college football. So be sure to tune in for that and get our reactions of the game. Maybe it's joyous, maybe it's depressing. We don't know yet. That's to come on Monday. That is to be determined on Monday. But other than that, all I'll say is, like I usually do, if you're watching from YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube. That helps us out a lot with pushing our content up the YouTube chain. And then if you're over on Twitter, or if you have a Twitter, be sure to follow us on Twitter as well, right down below. So do all that good stuff, help support us, and just help us continue to push out our content. Hopefully we can make 2022 a great year in regards to that as well, continue to grow.
Absolutely. We've been at this for a year. Like you said, we started right before the Peach Bowl last year's when we sat down. We had Kyle on the show with us back then too, but he's a little busy for us now. So we've narrowed it down to the two of us here. But it's been a fun year. We look forward to a fantastic 2022. Hopefully we're ringing that in with a national championship by Georgia. But as always, keep it classy in the Classic City, and we will catch you guys next week. Go Dogs.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Dogs Daily on Sports Illustrated. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Dogs Daily crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at Jeremiah_Stod7, to Kyle at DK Fubderberg, and Jonathan at 22_Jman. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime, go Dogs!